Welcome to the Behind the Vision podcast. In this episode, we explore J Blasé's journey to becoming a full-time DJ, giving back to the youth, and of course, music. Hope you enjoy the show. How'd you get the name Blasé?
That's a good question. So one of my friends actually, to backtrack, I used to do a YouTube channel, and my name was Mr. Shoelace. I did sneaker reviews. So I actually got paid from a blog called Kicks on Fire to review sneakers, which was pretty cool. They used to send me shoes, and I got to review them and all this stuff, which was pretty cool. And I stopped doing that. I kind of just got over it. I didn't really see the longevity in it, and I was like, oh, I'm too cool for this. Like, that was kind of like my thing. I'm like, I'm done doing this. Like, I've always loved fashion, but I was like, yeah, I'm gonna stop doing these. And my Instagram name and all my social media was Shoelace everywhere. And one of my buddies like, you gotta change this. Like, this isn't really a thing anymore. And I was like, all right, like, I don't know what to change it to. And like, he said that probably like months ago. And then one day we went out and he just kept calling me Blasé. He's like, Blasé, that's your new name now, Blasé. I'm like, okay, like, we'll just go with it. And then there's a song by Ty Dolla $ign called Blasé that came out like that same year. So then everyone started saying that because there's an expression called like blase blah, like it's like so on and so forth. That's what it means. So then my buddy just started calling me just Blase, and then that song blew up. So then when I changed my name, everyone just like immediately attached me with that song. So it was just like Blase. And then I changed my @name to J Blasé, but I spelled it Blazay so you could pronounce it because you can't do accents on Instagram. And then I started DJing, and I was like, this is what it'll be. So I just changed the name to I'm J Blasé, and then I went from there.
Yeah, I love it. It just rolls off the tongue.
Yeah, it's like it stands out because I don't like. There's so many like weird DJ names, like DJ and like DJ Flame or like DJ whatever. I'm like, I'm not really like that like type of person. There's finds like wrestlers, like I'm not that like loud and flamboyant, but I'm like Blasé, like is memorable. Like it's like it can be professional but still like cool because it could be my last name. Most people think it's like my middle name, and I'm like, no, it's not tied to me at all. So
yeah. Dang, and you did shoe reviews.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I did that my name is Jordan. A lot of people don't know that. My first name is Jordan. I'm named after Michael Jordan because I was born in '92 when Michael Jordan was just like in his era. Yeah. And so my first baby shoes are Jordans. I've always been into super big fashion. My mom's like really big on like clothes and fashion and stuff. So I just kind of carried that all the way through like high school. And in high school, I started working at Finish Line. That was like my first job. I was getting paid like no money, but I got access to all the shoes. So then I just made that my thing. I was like, I would always post them on Facebook. So I could go in the back. This is like before social media was really big. Like now you'd get in trouble for this. But on Facebook, like I would just go in and post like, oh, we have these shoes coming out next week. So I'd be like the first person on Facebook, like as far as like in Minnesota that was like posting these shoes. So I'd be like, oh, these shoes come out next week. Like hit me up or whatever. And people would just come in and buy them from me. And then I was like, I should probably do something with this. And then I was like, because I've never really wanted to work like a 9-to-5, but I've always been good at talking to people. So I was getting sales jobs. So I've worked at car dealership, I worked at a bank, did all these different things, but I'm like, that's not really like what I want to do. Like I love working with people. So the review thing was like my next best thing. I was like, oh, okay, like I can talk to the people, give them information. And it's like I look cool doing it. I get to have all the shoes and stuff. So it worked out pretty well. Just the longevity of like my YouTube channel was like blowing up. But the longevity of it, I just didn't really see it like working out from a financial standpoint because I was spending so much money on shoes. And I was like, I just want to buy the shoes I want. I don't really want to buy all these shoes that other people want. So
dang. So you did the YouTube channel. Like how big were you able to grow it? You were doing
so my YouTube, I think it stopped at like 5,000 subscribers. I think that's like the peak. It was something around there. And I'd had it for just under a year. So it was pretty big. But I was just spending so much. Like I still lived at home with my mom at that time, and I was like hard to justify like, oh mom, give me for your rent. And I'm spending like rent money on shoes every month. So it just didn't make much sense.
Yeah. So you were doing that when you were working at the shoe shop?
Yep. So I worked at a place called Finish Line in the Mall of America. Yeah. And then I worked at a place called Phenom, which is like a boutique sneaker store here that got like more of the limited sneakers. So I kind of like took a pay cut going there, but it was like, oh, we'll give you like your size and all the shoes you want. So I was like, okay, like cool. Like I was like more so focused on that. This is like Instagram really wasn't that big yet. Like there was a couple big sneaker Instagram pages, but like it was like everyone was kind of figuring out like their finesse on social media. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to the sneaker store, and that was even cooler because I got to post more limited shoes early, and they didn't care at all. They're like, do whatever you want. Then I left there and went to work at Dick's Sporting Goods. I ended up being like a team lead, which is like of the sports department. So I got to like restock all the lacrosse sticks and like baseball gloves and all that stuff because I love basketball. So I was like, okay, I'll do this, and it was like a manager role, so it looked better for a resume. And I went to college for 2 years, but I wasn't a huge fan of college. I just like didn't see it panning out for me. I love business, but I was like, the thing that like always scared me about college, I'm like, if all these professors have the knowledge of like what they're learning, why don't they start their own business? So I was like, I have the passion, but like the book smarts, I was like, I'm not seeing the longevity in that either. So I always like worked. I was always like, I'm gonna work. I'm gonna make sure I work. So yeah, I did the Dick's Sporting Goods thing. Still was doing the sneaker thing on top of that. Left the sneaker thing and then went to work at Wells Fargo, and that's why I did the Wells Fargo. Did that for 2 years. Quit my job at Wells Fargo and didn't know what I was gonna do. I was just like really stressed. There was like this whole thing at Wells Fargo about like fraud and sales stuff that happened like a while ago now. So I quit my job, didn't know what I was gonna do. I was like, Mom, let me live rent free for a year, and I'll just like figure something out. So I had some money saved up. I went on.
Shout out to Mom.
Yeah, no, Mom, salute Mom. She's the best. I'm an only child, so my mom like gets it. She's like always, we're like best friends more than anything. Awesome. So I was like, just let me live rent free for a year. I was 24 at the time, I think. I was like, let me just figure this out. I went on 2 trips that year. So I left my job in January of whatever year this was. I forgot what year it was, but I left my job in January. I said, if I don't have a job by the following January, I'll go back to Wells Fargo if I have to or whatever. Like I'll figure it out. So fast forward to December, still don't know what I'm going to do. Like really, really stressed, but trying to like play cool. Ended up at an event called Art Basel in Miami, which is like, if anyone, like imagine uptown Minneapolis, but every venue's rented out by like big liquor companies and record labels. And it's like, you go into this like hole in the wall bar and it's like your favorite artist is performing. Like when I went there, like Metro Boomin was DJing randomly, and I like looked around and it was like the most diverse crowd I've like ever seen. It was like Latin, black, white, and like everyone who like, some people like didn't even like, English wasn't even their first language, and like everyone was bonding over music. And I was like, looked at my friend, I was like, hey, like I think I could do this. And he was like, what do you mean, like loud music playing? I'm like, I think I could like DJ, because like I was always the person who like had the aux in the car, or like at house parties, like always was like, I'll run the music, because I'm like an introverted person. So I was like, I think I could do this when I get back home. And he was like, yeah, sure you can, or whatever. And like began to like continue to party or whatever. And the rest of the weekend I just kept thinking about it. So I went back home, bought like an intro controller, which is like the DJ controller, and taught myself on YouTube. And Dang. By January I had my first show, which I got paid like $100 for, which is cool, because I'm like $100 of money that like off of talent I taught myself. And then now it's my full-time job. Yeah. So
dude, that's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's like, crazy.
So did you go to college for business?
Yeah, so I went to Normandale Community College in Bloomington for business and marketing. Okay. But I had to do basically my general, so I only had like one business class, which was like the one class I liked. But then like doing accounting and all these other general classes, I was like, I'm not seeing like how I could do it. And me being like an only child, like my mom didn't come from money at all, single parent. I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna pay for this. So I kept, every time I was there, I was like, I'm paying for something that I don't want to be paying for. So I kept thinking about the bill that was going to come before I was even done with it. Yeah. So I was like causing me anxiety in that. And I was like, I'm not even like having fun with this. And then I was struggling with like accounting, and I was still trying to like, I was like, and it's totally on me too, because I was like, I still wanted to try to like party and like do stuff, and not even like party as far as going out, but I just wanted to like hang out with my friends and like do all these other things. And they were all like doing their homework, because they're like, they can cram and do last minute stuff. And I'm not that way. I need to like take all the time I can to like get this task done. So I was like, oh no, we can hang out, we can go grab food, like it's fine, I'll figure it out. And I was like, damn, like I have all this homework to do tonight, what am I gonna do about that? So then that was like the stress of it. So I was like, this isn't for me.
Dang, that's cool. So you've kind of had like this interest in business, entrepreneurship, like, would you say ever since college kind of piqued your interest?
I think even before that, like I think when I was in high school, like there wasn't really like, there was a name for it, but not for like young people. Like young people, like what, like way more now, like entrepreneurship is more common. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where it's like, it just makes more sense. But now it's like kids are doing like streaming and Twitch and all these different things for like video games and all these random things. But for me, it was just, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. For me, I didn't know what I wanted it to be. Like I was like, I love thinking about how business works. I love the analytics of business, but in high school, they don't really teach you how that works, if that makes sense. Like they teach you about the math class. I always loved English. Like I said, I knew how to speak, but I didn't know where the longevity would come from those things. So I was just so like, I'm trying to think of like when I really had like the business mindset. I think,
Was it maybe when you started your YouTube channel? Like, did that?
I think once I worked at the sneaker store and saw like people liked me for something that I just was doing, like I was like, oh, you can like have a job in something you're passionate about. Like normally I thought like when I was growing up, I was like, oh, I want to be like a realtor. I want to be like all these things. And I was like, oh, it's like when I got older, I was like, that's not really what my vision is. And then once I like actually had a passion for something, I was like, oh, you can actually make money off something you're passionate about. That's when I really dove into like, okay, like the behind the scenes of business and like how like I learned a lot about like buying and stuff from working at that boutique store where I was like, okay, like buying merchandise and like how it's like you buy it half off in the retail. Like, so if a shirt's $30, you're paying $15 for it. And then they get $15 profit off of it. Like those little things like that. I was like, oh, I didn't know any of this. Like you don't learn that in high school. So it's like, and just like you were talking about earlier before we started recording, like your clothing line, like I'm sure you learned so much about like cost of garments versus like the printing versus all these things. Those are the things that enticed me of like, okay, like why didn't we learn about this stuff in like textbooks? So then once I did the sneaker blog and did the YouTube and had to create all those like videos and stuff and like pay people to make like a logo for me and all these different things and graphic design, I'm like, oh, I love like the arts of things. So I was like, oh, I should do more stuff like that. But DJing just never seemed like, it just seemed so far fetched because like I remember when I was like 12, I wanted to DJ, but this was like when turntables were big and turntables are like $1,200 a turntable. And my mom's like, who's going to teach you how to do that? Like I can't buy you records and let you just break records. I was like, oh, that's a good point. And then I like went on to like another dream. I was like, oh, okay. But like, I just grew up loving music. Like every time my mom drove me to school, like I'd be in the back seat and she would always play like old school R&B. And I just grew up loving that. Like I was like, oh, R&B is like my thing. So every time like I DJ at the end of like my sets, I always end with R&B. Like that's like my thing. Yeah.
Would you say that kind of laid the foundation for you then becoming like interested in DJing?
The original, like when I was younger?
Yeah, like just being around your mom, the music she was playing. Even like you mentioned that you're an introvert, so like you just like manning like the mics and like the playing more music and stuff.
Yeah, so I think that laid the foundation without me even knowing. Like I was like, oh, I love music. I thought everyone loved music as much as me. And then when I got to high school, some people like really loved it, some people didn't. And before streaming, it was like you had to legally download like all the music. Like, so that was really cool to me because I would always like come to school with my iPhone with like new music that no one had, like new mixtapes, like new Lil Wayne. That was like big for me in high school. Like Wayne was dropping so much music at that time, and I was like, this is sick. Like I have this version of song no one has, but I didn't view it as like DJing. I was just like, oh, like people at the lunch who want to hear like my music. It's like, oh, it's like a compliment when someone's like, oh, let me hear what you listen to. Like let me hear one of your earphones. I was like, okay, cool. Like did that. And then, like I said, once I like started like going to parties and stuff, people were like, "Oh, like put Jordan's like playlist on, like he knows what's up." And then from there, I was like, "Oh, like so." Actually, it's actually crazy. So you know Austin, right? Austin, you know Birdie in Austin.
Yeah.
So Birdie is actually the one who got me into DJing.
Oh,
which is
dang.
crazy. That's like a
cool.
podcast like exclusive.
Yeah.
So one time, me, Birdie, and my boy Da were all sitting in the car. And Birdie, I was like playing music or whatever, and Birdie's like, you ever thought about DJing? And I was like, no, like, why would I think of that? And she was like, well, you just always like are so passionate about music. And if anyone knows Birdie, like, she like speaks like affirmation into you like so casually, which is like super cool. And so she was just like saying it so like you're dumb for not doing it, but like was saying it like a nice way. So she was like, oh, like, why wouldn't you? And I was like, I don't know, like, who's gonna teach me? She's like, well, I don't know, you just seem like you really love music and like why wouldn't you do it? So then I was still working at Wells Fargo at the time. So then I think that like kind of pitched the idea before I got to Miami. So then when I went to Miami, it was like, dang, I could do this. Like, it doesn't seem that crazy. And then I taught myself on YouTube, and from there. So shout out to Birdie. Like, she really kind of laid that Easter egg. And I tell her that all the time. Like, I DJ their wedding, which is like such a full circle moment. Like, pretty crazy. So,
Dude, that's awesome. She just like mentioned that to you, and you just felt it like resonate with you.
yeah, because it was like, again, me being like introverted person, I was an introvert. Like, you kind of like don't think about other people. Like when I play music, I'm like kind of in my own like bubble. I'm like, I'm just gonna be on my phone. I'm gonna pick these like few songs, and it's like you kind of get like satisfaction when people are like, oh, this is a fun song. Like, who is this artist? Or I kind of get like a rush from that. So when she was like, why don't you like DJ? And like I was already going by Blasé at that point, but she's like, Blasé, why don't you DJ? And I was like, and we were like in like a drive-through like McDonald's or something. I'm pretty sure we're at the drive-through McDonald's in Uptown. And I was like, I don't know, like I got like weirded out kind of, because I was like, oh, I don't know, like I've never thought about that. And she was like, you just should do it. And she just was making direct eye contact with me, and I was like, okay, like I guess. So then I like kept playing music, and then it's like just crazy, because then once her wedding happened, I was like, oh, without a doubt I'm DJing your wedding. Why would I not? So worked out.
Dude, that's sweet. Was it hard for you to make the leap from like working at Wells Fargo to then DJing and pursuing that?
Yeah, like the hardest part is like, one, like entrepreneurship is really hard because you're always on the clock. Like, you're always working, and a lot of people think like, oh, like it's great because you make your own hours, but I'm like, in the beginning especially, it's like you have to put in 10 times more. So it's like the first year I was just practicing my craft all the time. Like, I was just constantly working on like my transitions, which is like changing from one record to the other. And it was like, that's like what I knew was gonna make like a good DJ. I was like, if I can get the transitions right, I already know like my song selection's good. But there's a lot of DJs who like have great song selection, but it's like transition makes everything. It's like, because basically like if you're a good DJ, you should let the night flow without anyone even knowing like anything's really happening for the most part. Once you like get more like tailored to it, you can like do fun stuff with it. But basically people notice bad DJs, but they don't always notice good DJs, because a good DJ, it's like the night just flows, and you're like, oh, this is a fun night. Like, I had a good time, and you're like, oh wow, the DJ was pretty good. Like, so yeah, practicing was like the first year was really hard, because I was just like constantly doing that. I was like, when's the income gonna come? When's the income gonna come? But I just had confidence in myself that I was gonna start getting more shows. And then it's like, once you do that, you still have to focus on the business piece of it, of like, okay, like branding, how much you charge for a show. And it's tough because entrepreneurship can be very competitive. Like, some people will email like 3 DJs and be like, hey, Austin, what do you charge? Okay, Blasé, what do you charge? What does this person charge? And if they don't know anything about like the craft, they're probably just gonna take the cheapest one. So you might have DJed for a week, and I might be DJing for 3 years, but you're $300 cheaper than me, or whatever the price may be. They're like, okay, we're gonna go with Austin. Like, his email seemed okay. We'll go with that. So that was the tough part for me, like trying to figure that out. But once you like establish your brand, and the cool thing was me, like with the shoe reviews and like me knowing a lot of people, my following kind of just transcended into the DJing, because everyone was like, oh, Blasé, like he always does fun stuff, like it's gonna be cool. So they kind of just started showing me love at my shows, which is how Basin Bars got so poppin'. Like, before I had any like followers or supporters or whatever, like my friends were like, oh, we're gonna come to Basin Bar, and that's how I came up like with the name Blasé and Friends, because it's like, when you come to one of my shows, it's like you get to see like what it's like to kick with me and my friends for a night. That's how I always viewed it. So it's like, I might not know you, but it's like, yeah, these are my people. Everyone here's in a safe environment. We just get to kick and have fun, forget your stresses, and you're part of the crew for the night. So it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Do you remember like the early days of just trying to get someone to like pay you to DJ?
Yeah, man. Like, it's just tough thinking about like some of the shows I did, because like back then I didn't know to like do stuff for free for like exposure, because that's a tough thing that people try to throw at you a lot. Like, oh, this is good exposure for you. Like, these people we have a good following, and I'm like, okay, like let's do that, I guess. But luckily, since I had like that business mindset that we had talked about from like Wells Fargo and things like that, I'm like, exposure is great, like depending on what the venue is. But at the end of the day, you could pay me and I'm still gonna get the same amount of exposure. So I had to start saying no to a lot of stuff, which kind of makes it tough, because you can kind of get like blacklisted a little bit in some places, because a lot of the like Minnesota's pretty small, so a lot of people are kind of involved in the same circles. So I really had to pick a different lane. That's why you don't see me do like a lot of club stuff. Like, a lot of people are like, oh, why don't you DJ more clubs? I'm like, clubs, like the the rate of how much you're working plus the payout isn't always worth it, depending on the clubs. And it's like me, I like working with youth and like working with things that mean more of a different, which is why I like movement culture. I like doing stuff that like let's empower people and doing different types of like events, but still have fun. Like movement culture, you got to network, you get to hear great music, you get to see literally a talent show of people showing their businesses. Like that's super dope. And it's like, and it's not a late night, it's not crazy. And it's like, you get I got the same rush from doing that I would do in the club. And it's like, I don't have to worry about late nights. I don't have to worry about like people arguing or like being too close together. Like it was just like fun. So it's like, I love doing stuff like that. And I work with a program called Young Life too, which is a faith-based group that I DJ for them for free every Monday because I like working with the high schoolers. So I'm like, I started in Minneapolis and then now I work in the YZ area, but I just come DJ for the kids for like 2 hours. We play like a bunch of games and it's like kids treat me like a superhero. It's like awesome. I'm like, yeah, man. Like I try to show them you can do other stuff. Like, okay, college might not be your thing or whatever it may be, but it's like you have to apply yourself and you have to actually like work hard at it. Like I tell them all the time because like, oh, Blasé, like you're so cool, you're a DJ. I'm like, yeah, but like these are the things that you don't know. So I get to tell them all the stuff behind the scenes and I get to have these questions. And I'm like, yeah, this is the hard part. Like of you don't know when the next check's gonna come from always. Like the first year I struggled a lot, had to make sacrifices, didn't get to hang out with my friends. My friends might be going to a different party, but I'm DJing this like wedding 3 hours away or whatever it may be. So that's like the pros and cons of it, I guess. But I love what I do and it's just crazy because I got to manifest like a lot of this stuff. So I think that's the coolest part.
I love the way that you kind of like view the different places you'll DJ at. Yeah. Like you said, on like Mondays, you'll DJ for like a place for kids and stuff for free. Yeah. And then like you're also down to do like movement culture stuff. Yeah. Like, is there a vetting process you do for places that you're like willing to take on as a DJ and places you're not?
I mean, it's really just the people. Like once, like we were talking about earlier, like with the venues and things like that, like all these places like are virtually the same until you meet the people and like what is their passion. So it's like I really get to like talk to the people and be like, okay, like what makes this something I should be involved in, or why do you want me involved in it? If it's like, oh yeah, we just like want this to be a cool event, I'm like, that's one thing, but like movement culture has like a purpose. Like once Devin told me the purpose, I'm like, oh, like I want to be involved in that, like no questions asked. And it's like also co-signed too. Like he knew Austin. I was like, oh, Austin's really good people. Like Austin's really like only keeps good people around him. And I'm the same way. Like I'm like, someone says like Blasé said like this is a good thing or whatever, like there's like a stamp of approval. So it's like I'm all about like cosign. So I'm like, okay, like that allows me to buy into like whatever's going on. And then it's like I try to give everything a shot. But I just believed in what was going on. Like as soon as I saw like the enjoyment when people talk about the event, like with the movement culture, as soon as I heard the passion behind it, I was like, oh, this is gonna be like out of the park. Like I'm super excited. And I always like say like I want to make the music something you don't have to even like stress about. Like I'll handle the music, I'll handle all that. Just let me know how I can make the event better and what you need from me. But from there, yeah, it's really just the people. Like that's all I can say. The passion people have about what they're trying to do makes it different. Like, and I love working with kids because, like I said, I was like in high school, I was kind of like a misled kid. Like I wasn't terrible, but I wasn't like didn't have the craziest work ethic. I didn't have the biggest friend group. I was kind of just like I was the person who was like around but never really had like a story. Like people were like, oh, like that's Jordan. Like he's cool. He's in my like class, but like they didn't really like know about me. So it's cool now I can be around high schoolers and see like, okay, like this person might be on the outskirts of whatever's going on, but this kid I can see is passionate about something. Let me try to like pour into him and be like the mentor that I didn't have, which is pretty awesome. So those are the things that kind of drive me to do it. And Bass and Bar is just like fun. Like I love Bass and Bar. That's been one of my first shows. That was one of my first live shows I ever did. So I was like, I always want to keep Bass and Bar at some capacity to be involved. So hope that answered your question.
Yeah. Do you mentor anyone right now, or is it kind of something you'll do just with like people that you'll meet with? Because it seems like something that really just like drives you and you have like a passion for it.
I mean, I don't know. The high schoolers, I consider myself mentoring them, but as far as like any like young entrepreneurs, I should. I mean, I don't know. I've never really thought about it. I just try to speak the truth that I think people want to hear but are scared to hear, which is like, I'm always like, I'll be like the scapegoat for like, I'll say things that people don't want to like hear, I guess. Like that's why I say like a lot of times like a lot of people like don't book me for certain stuff because like, oh, Blasé might be difficult to Blasé might be difficult to work with. But yeah, so that's one of the things that's like tough. It's like being the first person to speak out on something makes people feel like you're like a nuisance sometimes. But it's like I'm willing to do that so the next person doesn't have to go through that. Like I'm willing to say like, hey, DJs need to get paid more, and I might not get that show, but it'll make them consider for the next young DJ coming through that's like, okay, we see the value in him. Like with Bass and Bar, even like I had to talk to them. I had a lot of meetings with them over the last like 3 years of like, hey, like I get that you think like, because they kind of like most business owners, like I said, like view DJing as like a playlist. They think we're just like up there, we hit play, and it's like, what's the difference between the DJ and a Spotify playlist? And I'm like, I'm reading the crowd constantly. I'm like, I have to literally know the technique of what I'm doing. I have to make the night fun, but not get people too hype where it's like gets rowdy. So it's like a fine line of that. And if you're really like good at the craft, it's like seamless. But if you're not, it can go left. So I'm like, you need to pay DJs so that it's consistent. Like your following is consistent of what you want, of what your brand is. Cause I tell them all the time, I'm like, it's like having multiple chefs in a kitchen. Like the quality is not going to be the same if they're not all on the same page. Like if you come into a place and like, this burger's so good every time I come here, but they have another chef who makes it completely different, then the brand quality is like shot. Mm-hmm. So I view DJs the same way. I'm like, if the DJ who comes in after me doesn't have the same respect for people, then it's going to ruin the brand as a whole. Yeah. So, but most people don't view it that way. So they're like, oh, like, I guess. But it like Bass and Bar, they're like the coolest people. Like they always respect my like voice. And every time I want to sit down and talk to them about anything, they're like, okay, like that makes sense. But not all places are like that. So that's the hard thing about it.
Yeah. What's been like the hardest conversation you've had to have as a business owner?
Hardest conversation I've had to have. I think it's always hard, like, the thing that's like always pulls on my heartstrings is like budgeting for like weddings. Like that's like a hard one for me because it's like a wedding's a big deal. And I love that people want me to be part of their big day, but they also have to like see the value in me. So pricing with that can be like weird. And then some venues, I guess it's like the one I'm trying to think the hardest thing I've had to talk about with like owners, I guess, like diversity, like with staff, I've talked about like a lot of stuff like that. I'm like, there needs to be like, everyone needs to be inclusive with what's going on. As far as like music or whatever it may be, I have a lot of conversations like that, which I think it's always hard having conversations that outside of music as a DJ, because people are like, oh, you observe this stuff. And I think everyone observes it, but not everyone will talk about it. So I think anytime I talk about anything outside of music, it has like a chance of becoming a difficult conversation, because people are like, oh, like you're kind of just supposed to like shut up and play the music. And I'm like, well, to do my job at its peak performance, I need your help in that. So I think that can be like the hardest thing. So I think budgeting and just like talking about anything outside of music, those are like the two sticky situations, I guess. Mm-hmm. But
how did you kind of build your rate as like a DJ?
I don't know. I think it's constantly changing. Like my rate is like constantly like going up, and like it's just different. Like I don't know. I think I still struggle with that. Like talking about like finances with people is like always hard. Like it's just annoying because I'm like, I would love to do this job. If I could pay my bills, I would do this job like all the time. Like as long as I can pay like my bills and like feel like I'm not getting taken advantage of, I'll virtually do like whatever if I like believe in it. But it's tough because some people try to take advantage of that. And like I said, because other DJs like, where it's weird because it's like the DJ community is so small because Minnesota doesn't have that many like venues versus like if you go to Miami, there's like every corner there's a different bar and a different DJ. Here it's like there's virtually probably like 20 DJs and probably 10 of them everyone like knows about, and there's probably four or five venues that people really go to. So the DJs kind of all like stack, like I wish we could all stack hands on like this is what we should charge, kind of like a union of it, but people are just like, people don't want to see other people shine. Like it's weird. Like a lot of DJs will be like, oh, like don't book him, like I'll do it cheaper, because they get nervous that like, oh, if this good DJ gets into this venue, then I might never get to DJ there again. But me, I'm like always trying to bring in like other DJs. Like if I can find a DJ that's like good, and it's also tough because, sorry, I transitioned, but it's also tough because like in a place where people drink, you have to make sure people don't drink too much. Like I've had like DJs who like drink too much. That's like another hard conversation I had. I'd be like, hey bro, like I can't like book you to DJ anymore because like you drink too much. Like, because I don't drink when I DJ. Like I'll have like maybe like a glass of wine, but like I'm pretty chill with it because you gotta think like you're how many songs do I play in an hour? Every song's like 2 minutes now. I play so many songs an hour. I have to read my computer, I have to do birthday shout outs. I have to keep the crowd hype. I have to like people are trying to request songs for me, especially at basement. So it's like if I drink or like I'm not like in 100% like focus, like the night could go left really quick. So I always try to tell other DJs like that. But like there's a DJ Slimpa, shout out to him. I have him open for me all the time. He just opened for me last night at Basement Bar, and he's like super cool young DJ, really talented. Always is like a sponge. He's always trying to like pick up game. Like he'll ask me random questions that I've never even thought about that'll like make me think like, oh, like this is how I do that, but I've never thought about it. He'll be like, oh, other people do it this way. I'm like, oh, cool. Like it's good to know. And then it's like we kind of help each other in that. So that's kind of the closest person to a mentor mentee I have.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So you have people open for you.
Yeah, I try to like because it's like last night like I DJ'd at the W for a Fashion Week show that ended at 10:30. I normally DJ at Basement Bar at 10. So like this is the perfect opportunity for me to have another DJ open for like an hour and a half. They get to work with like my like regulars who like is a big crowd, established crowd, and it's a diverse crowd. Because I tell everybody, I'm like Basement Bar really set me up for success because it's such a melting pot of people. Where it's like other clubs, like if you go to like Cowboy Jacks or like there's like Gold Room, it's like it's predominantly one race or one like lane of people. Where it's like okay, you learn how to play for those people, but then when you get to like weddings and all these things, when weddings are like a big melting pot of people because it's like family, uncles, grandpas, like so it's like you have to go through all these decades of music and like try to relate to all these people. And Basement Bar really set me up for success with that. So I try to bring in other DJs to like, hey, like here's a crowd where you can do like open format and play more stuff that you want and have fun doing it. So he got to DJ till like 11:30 and he had another show to go to. So he's like, oh man, anytime like I can DJ here, like let me know. And that's like his fifth or sixth time opening for me, which is pretty awesome. So
is that something that's normal? And I mean, maybe like for big shows, I could definitely see like you have different DJs and stuff, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Is it like normal for you to have like pre-DJing? You're like bringing on people before you go on?
Like because like 4 hours, like I DJ 4 hours at Basement. That's a long time, like for like just because it's a lot of music. So typically, what I like to do, and this is like I didn't create this format by any means. Like most people do have like an opening DJ. Like most bars or like concerts. Like think of it like a concert. Like you go to a concert, there's an opening act before the main act. It's kind of the same thing. Like, and it's cool to have two different people because it's like we think two different ways. So it's like they'll play different music, I'll play different music. That way, the music's not the same all night. So I like collaborating with other DJs. So it's like, oh, like this is a song I've never heard. Who is this? Like, let's share music. Let's do that. But some people are like, don't look at my computer. I don't want you to like take my songs or whatever. Like they get really like weird about that. But I because that's how you kind of start in DJing. You start opening for other DJs, kind of learn the craft of like how to set up, how to do these things, like do's and don'ts of that venue, and then eventually, hopefully, you can work your way up to being like the closer.
Yeah,
so.
Opening for people is awesome because like it just gives you the opportunity to just grow and like refine your craft.
Yeah,
especially when you're just like having other people open for you.
Yeah.
Because you're just helping them grow. Yeah,
and I tell everyone, like, especially opening DJs, I'm like, it's all about building the night up. Like, you don't start the night out with, like, the biggest record that everyone wants to hear because it's like, how do you top that? So it's cool, like, okay, if you're the closing DJ somewhere, yeah, like, you can kind of go through these, like, like, the top 40 songs that are going to be, like, these are for sure going to do it. But I'm like, what do you do before that? What are those songs? So it's, like, cool to put people in different venues and be, like, open for this crowd of people who, like, don't really know you and, like, you gotta kind of win them over. So it's cool to have other people go into that, kind of like walk into that gauntlet of like, you should try it out, have fun, like play some records you wouldn't normally play and get creative that way. Like DJing, most DJs I think would agree, like your best like sets come from like your back against the wall, or like your best transitions of like, crap, this song's about to end. What's a good song I could go into this? Like that's one of my best transitions. Like come, I'm like, oh, these songs sound sick together. I didn't even think of these. Like that's why I try to go into all my sets like freestyle. I don't really have like a preset playlist or anything like that. As I've done so many venues, I have like, so basically like I'll make like what's called like a crate on my computer of different venues. So like a wedding playlist. So when I did like Birdie and Austin's wedding, they kind of told me the songs that the kind of main songs they wanted. I put those into a crate, and then I have other folders that I've done other events for. So when I see like, okay, these songs like that they wanted, okay, these songs are similar to this other file I have. Let me go to here and kind of like bounce around, and then it's like fun because then it's not what even the bride or groom expected, and they like it.
Yeah.
So.
How long and how difficult was it for you to like cultivate your music library?
I mean, it's constantly growing. Like as you do more events, like once you do like corporate events, and it's like diversity is what really like builds your computer. Like I was saying, like if you only DJ one spot, you probably only have that one type of music that they want. But since I've done stuff for high schoolers, so like high schooler, like with the TikTok phase, like songs, they burn through songs so fast now with TikTok. Like I'll DJ a song on Monday, and by the next Monday they'll be like, Blasé, this song's like old, man. Like I'm like, all right, cool. Like keep me young, let me know. Like I love like that they like, because kids are just like truthfully honest. Like they're like rude without knowing it. So it's like cool because they're like, oh, like, no, we don't like this. I'm like, cool, I'm glad you're telling me. Because if I went to Basin Bar or wherever I DJ at, people wouldn't really tell me, like, oh, like, you're messing up, bro. Like, you kind of get, like, as you get more popular, you get, like, a lot of yes men around you. I'm like, oh, bro, you killed it. You're always killing it. I'm like, well, I want people to, like, send me new music of what they want, or, like, what they want to hear, because then that keeps me, like, fresh. But high schoolers, like, they put me on to a lot of new music. Like, they put me on to, like, Kid Laroi and all these new artists, and, like, Olivia Rodrigo. Like, they were super early on that stuff. Like, so I'm like, that's cool. I'm like, now I know this. So I have these songs for when I DJ for them. And then I'll go to these other events and see, like, okay, if I did, like, a corporate event that has, like, kids at it, I'm like, oh, these kids are in high school. They probably like the same stuff my Young Life kids like. I'm going to play that and win them over. When it's like, once you win the kids over, parents love you, then it just kind of trickles.
So do the kids keep you humble then in your work?
Oh, for sure. For sure.
They're just blatantly honest with you.
Yeah, and I love that. Like, God's like, I never get offended. I tell them all the time, I'm like every time at the end of the day, we have like announcements, and there's like always a slide that's like, send Blasé new music. I'm like, anytime you guys have a song you want, send it to me. Like, I want to hear it. Like, I'll listen to it. Obviously, it's appropriate, like that type of stuff. But I'm like, I want to hear what you guys like, because times are so different. When I graduated high school in 2011, like times are way different now. So it's like kids don't have a radio anymore. It just goes right to their phone. So it's like a lot of stuff won't make it to my timeline because it's just like the algorithms and random stuff that I just don't watch. If I don't watch this TikTok, I'm not gonna see this song. So like the trending songs, those are cool. Like it's easy to find the trending stuff, but what's gonna be the next up? Because that's the thing with DJs. Like you kind of got to predict the next big record, and that's like my favorite thing. Like I'll play a record that might not get the biggest like crowd roar when I play it, but then it's like in a couple weeks when the song blows up, they're like, oh, that DJ played it that one time. That's like my favorite thing. So it's like if you work in a new song, like a really new song that comes out like that Friday, then it's like by the next couple of weeks when they like know the words, like, oh, I've heard this somewhere, where have I heard it? Then they remember me. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Sometimes DJs will just make like the most fire remixes of just like normal songs too. Like they'll just take a song and just like spin it up a little bit, and it's great.
Yeah, complete different record. And you can like refresh a song that way. You can do a throwback song with like a new beat, and it's like game changer. And I don't do too much production. Like I wish I got a little more into like producing and like making dance records. I tried it a little bit during like the pandemic, but it was hard for my brain to like reconstruct how the music worked. I was like, oh, I want to like mix these records together. But maybe I'll approach it again at some time.
Yeah. Is that something that you'd want to do in the future, is produce music like for other people, or even just being able to mix up already current created stuff?
I mean, I mix up songs every now and then, but like I really would like to be like a creative director of like a venue. I think that's like where I see my vision going, where it's like I could curate a whole space and like have the music, book the DJs, like kind of see the vision of a place from like ground up. I think that's like how my brain works, and I think I like learned that from like way back in high school. But it just took so long for me to figure out what that was. So it's like I was really naive with my DJing dream. Like I didn't think of it as like a popular thing, which like sounds crazy and people think I'm like kidding. But when I thought I was a DJ, like me being my introverted self, I'm like, oh, I want to be on a stage away from everybody. No one's gonna pay attention to me if the music's good, and that'll be it. Like I was like thinking so like dumbly about it, and it's like I wanted to be behind the scenes. If I could go back in time, I would like put on like a marshmallow like helmet, and like no one knows, and everyone thinks like, oh, I still work at Wells Fargo, but secretly I'm this DJ on the weekends. Like that'd be sick.
What kind of helmet would you put on?
I don't know.
If you had a choice?
There's probably some type of like, probably some type of superhero thing. I don't know, like Deadpool or something crazy. I'd do something like that. Something wild. I love Marvel and comic books and stuff, so it'd be something crazy like that.
Yeah.
So
that's cool. Would you ever create your own like event, similar to like Coachella?
Festivals would be really fun. Like I think once I started DJing and like Soundset was a big thing, like because I went to Soundset a lot. I love going to concerts. Like before, it was hard missing out on concerts when I was like DJing, because I was like, oh, there's a show this night, and I'm like, dang, it falls on like this day I have a show or whatever. But doing that stuff would be really hard. Like, but it'd be fun. Like, I don't know. I don't know if I would do a festival, but it would be like, I think I'd be more like movement culture route where it's like, it doesn't have to be strictly music based. Like I think since I love music, I always used to think like everything has to be surrounded about music, but I love people networking and bringing people together like naturally. That's like the cool thing to me. So it's like music can kind of soften that and like bring people together a little bit. And that's why it was cool to like sit back and see it happen at the last event. I was like, oh, people are like naturally meeting each other and it's like not forced and awkward and like, hey, I'm this entrepreneur. Hey, I do this. Like it was just like, and I know that's like a big thing that you guys stand by, which was cool. But
yeah,
so that was my thing. Like I think if I did an event, it would be more so like maybe I would do like maybe I'd do like an R&B festival. I guess I never really thought about that. I'd probably do that. That'd be kind of
cool.
sick. Yeah, Blasé and Friends R&B festival.
Ooh,
That's sick.
are there many festivals in Minneapolis?
No, not that I know of. Not that are like. Not a hip hop festival. Soundset was like the last one, and Soundset kind of Austin's getting at something. Austin, we might have to make that happen.
Ooh, we could collab on it or something. Get a bunch
I'm with it. I would love it. Like I think that'd be super cool to like, cause I just like I get into like the most random things. Like I really like get into like my flyer design. Like when I do like like club flyers and things, I'm like, oh, this has to be like not the regular like flyer. It has to be like something special, and I just like really get into like the details of those things. But maybe that's a good vision. We might have to talk about that off camera.
Yeah, that'd be cool. So you also like doing some of the creative work.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well.
I love the behind the scenes. Like sometimes prepping for shows for me is like more fun than the show, because like I get like giddy off of like, oh, like I want to try out this new record, or like it's like, oh, this will be a new space. Wonder what this space is like. Like that's why it was cool doing the Fashion Week thing. So I'm like, oh, this is a complete different like element for me. How's that gonna work? And I got to talk to like the lady who like was the creative director for that. And I was like, oh, what's your vision for this? Like, what's your plan? And when she told me that, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go home and like prepare for it. So I got really excited. I did like all Afro beats, which I love Afro beats, but I don't really get to DJ those often. Like we don't have any like Afrobeat culture here as far as like big events. So I was like, yeah, let's do it. And it was cool to see like all the different fashion, because fashion and music go hand in hand to me. Like fashion, music, and sports are like all like hit the same highway at some point. So it was just fun. I had a good time. And then it was like going back to basement and doing that was really cool. So yeah.
Do you have a favorite venue that you DJ at? Or like
that I've ever DJ'd at?
Yeah, maybe that question as well, but you could blend it in. Like, has there been a pinnacle moment of like, this is the greatest like DJing moment that you've had?
Oh, greatest DJ moment I've ever had. Well, I've had a couple. So I DJ'd at Paisley Park, which was where Prince lived, which was pretty sick. That was really early in my career, and I was like kind of overwhelmed. I was like, didn't feel like I was ready for it, but I killed it. I think I got invited back a few times, so I did that like 3 times. But it was crazy because it was like Prince is just like this pinnacle of like, I feel like everyone knows a little bit about Prince, but not everyone knows like very few people know like a lot about Prince. And Prince is out of my era. Like he's like way older than me and all these things. So it's like I always knew him as like a legend. And my mom played his records like here and there, but she was still a pretty young mom. So I was like, okay, like I think I like can do this. And I had a mentor at the time who was a DJ who like was like, okay, like these are the kind of records you play. And it was all Prince records. So basically Prince at the Paisley Park, they do like a Paisley Park tour and it ends with like a dance party. And I was the DJ at the end of the dance party. And it was crazy because like they still honored like a lot of Prince's things. So like there's no swearing in the space. Like they don't want you to swear. There's no cell phones. They take your phones, which is like crazy. So when I like going into the show, I wasn't that nervous. I was just like, okay, like I need to prepare. I don't really get nervous for shows, but I was like, okay, this needs to be like the best, like because it's gonna be all Prince lovers. I was like, you can't like mess up. So then once we pulled up and like saw the space, like my like heart kind of stopped for a second. I was like, dang, this is like crazy. Like Minnesota legend, like passed away, obviously, R.I.P. Prince. But I'm DJing in his old home. Like this is like iconic. Like I'm like, this is like probably one of the biggest venues I could ever DJ in Minnesota. And then they like once I got there, like security like met us at the door and like took the phones. I was like, this is like real deal. Like this is crazy. But once I started DJing, it like all flowed and it was super fun. But I think that was a big one for me. I got to open for Juice WRLD at Myth. That was pretty crazy. And that was like like nuts because a DJ who was originally booked for it hit me up because he was like on another flight and he got booked for he like wasn't gonna make it. So he was like, I need you to do this. And it was like 3 hours. I'm like, all right. Like I've never opened for like a concert before. Like it was like, it's kind of a different vibe of reading the crowd, but I'd never done that before. But once I did that, I met him there. I went there and he ended up making it. So he was like, oh, you're just going to DJ with me now. I was like, all right, cool. So like did it. And it was just like, I was like, okay, like I can see the longevity in this. Like this is going to be something big. And then from there, I'm trying to think what other big shows I've done. I think those are the two biggest. I think those are the ones that like showed me like I'm actually good at what I'm doing. Cause you never really know like how talented you are at something. Like that's what I was talking to you before about like being humble, but then like having the confidence of like knowing. It took me like 2 years to like have the confidence like in my craft. I knew I was passionate about music, but I'm like, am I actually good at this? Or like, do people just support me? That's like the hard thing. But once I like done those couple venues and once people start writing you and reaching out to you personally, like, hey, like you made my wedding or like you know, my night at this place was so fun or whatever it may be. Like once people like attach you to a memory, then it's like, okay, like I feel this. So then, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Dang. Yeah, that would have to be cool. Just like the Paisley Park experience, going DJing there.
Yeah, it was nuts. It was like eerie a little bit, but it was like cool because I like I said, I'd never been to Paisley Park. I'd heard all these things about it and like actually like going through the back of it and like they had like his old tour bus out there still. And they still obviously have like all his outfits he wore there and stuff. And it's like really dark lighting in there and it was just like it was cool. It was like iconic. I was kind of like pinching myself. I was like, this is crazy. And like a lot of DJs like, how did you get this? And I'm like, I don't know. I was like, I really don't know. They found me.
Dang, that's cool. So they just reached out to you?
Yeah.
To be DJ there?
Yeah. So they reached out to my mentor. So I know how I got it. So my mentor at the time, he knew the security and they said they needed a DJ or they like might be losing a DJ or something like that. So then he reached out to them and then they reached out to me on Instagram. And we're like, hey, we need a DJ for this. So I'm assuming that's how it happened.
Dang.
That's a tough thing. Like my name gets in like so many rooms that I don't know. So when people hit me up, I always like never know how I got it because I always want to thank the people. Like, hey, I appreciate you for getting the show, but I never know. Like, they never tell you like, oh, like so and so. Well, sometimes they do, but like it's very rare. They're like, oh, so and so told us about you in passing or whatever. So I'm always like appreciate everybody who like spreads my name. So
yeah, is it true that Prince created like the explicit label for songs? I don't know if you. I feel like I heard that.
I don't think
somewhere, but
Prince might have. I think Prince was one of the reasons they had to create it, like the explicit.
Oh, okay.
But I know it was like I watched it. Actually, that's crazy. I watched a documentary a long time ago on like explicit stuff, and I know rock music was a big part of it too. Like Twisted Metal. Like I watched like a part where they had to like put the explicit on their music, and they were like, there was like a big fight of like it shouldn't have this sensory because it's gonna stop people from buying our records. So it was like ruining their sales. But Prince was like a pioneer, man. Like I'm not gonna act like I know everything about Prince. I really still know like very like few like facts about him, but he always was like very revolutionary in the fact of like record labels he wasn't really a big fan of. That's why like Prince like went under his like symbol for a while. Like he didn't even want to be addressed as Prince, so he was like naming his albums under the symbol so he didn't have to like pay them, I think, for his like record music, like for his like record rights or something like that. So it's like I've seen like like I said, very few things, but that was pretty interesting to me.
Yeah,
so
it is. Yeah, Purple Rain's a great movie.
Oh yeah, it's a classic. Yeah. It's one of those movies that like I rewatched it after like DJ there because I hadn't watched it since I was like young, and my mom like had it. But it's like it's a classic movie. Like baptized in the lakes of Minnetonka, man. That's like a big thing. So shout out to Prince, and like Prince is gonna be iconic forever. Like that's why it's cool seeing like how much Minnesota like shows love to him. So it's like cool that I can attach myself with that a little bit.
Yeah. What's your top 3 favorite artists?
Top 3 favorite artists, like of all time?
Yeah.
Or right now?
All time.
All time. Kid Cudi, for sure. Kid Cudi's my favorite artist by far. He's a big reason why I started DJing too. A kid in high school, the back of my biology class, I should have been studying for this test, wasn't. This kid had a flip phone, and he was like, "Hey, I want to put you on this new song." I was like,
on the flip phone,
flip phone, bro. Like downloaded MP3, like the worst quality ever. But it was day and night, and it was like before day and night had like really gotten big. And I was like playing, I was like, dang, this is like a dope song. And I'm like an introverted like kid. So he just kept saying like the lonely loner. And I was like, oh, like this kind of how I feel. Like I'm kind of like following through like life, like not really finding my path. So like I always like attach myself with Kid Cudi. So I think that's what made me like dive into music even more. So Kid Cudi, love Lil Wayne. Third, people are gonna kill me for this. Third.
You can be like, oh no, that's not right.
Yeah, no matter what I say, it's gonna be wrong. It's gonna probably be like an R&B artist. I gotta have R&B in there because I love R&B. I'd probably say Aaliyah maybe, or Usher's a big one. Chris Brown's a big one. I'm trying to think of who was like the most iconic in my childhood. Don't kill me for this, people, please. I'm gonna say Aaliyah. I'm gonna say Kid Cudi, Lil Wayne, Aaliyah. Those are my three.
Sweet.
That's just my personal preference. The tough thing with DJing is like people don't know how to separate. Like I think this is what like the disassociation with DJing is like. DJs like sometimes only play their favorite records, where it's like me, I try to play to what the crowd wants to hear. So it's like I normally don't get to play my favorite music because I'm like, you guys don't want to hear what I want to hear. I like low mellow music. Like when I'm not DJing, I'm listening to like super melodic, like chill. Because I'm like around high BPM, like high bass all the time. When I want to chill in the car, I'm like listening to like slow music. Like that's like relieves me. But I think a lot of DJs like struggle with that of like, oh, these are my favorite records, so they have to be their favorite records. But I'm like, I don't even want to play my favorite songs. I want to play like what the people want to hear. Mm-hmm. So some people come up to my shows like, bro, like you said you love Kid Cudi, like why didn't you play any Cudi? I'm like, well, it wasn't really the right night for it. Like to play like mellow Kid Cudi really wasn't the time. Like maybe Pursue the Happiness, but I'm like, it's also dated too. Like people want to hear new stuff, so I try to like work in music as much as I can. But yeah, that's like the tough thing. Like people follow me and they're like, oh, like that one time you said you really like this artist, why don't you play more of this artist? I'm like, it just wasn't the time. Like time and place for everything. So
hey man, anytime you play Pursuit of Happiness, I'll be dancing.
Hey, I played it at the movement event.
Oh yeah.
I was playing a couple.
You're playing some good songs.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like events like that allow you to play more like not just like club records. Like it's like you can play a little bit of everything. Like I could play J. Cole. I could go into an R&B record. I could play some Afro beats. I could play some like disco funk. Like I could play ABBA. I could play anything, like the Bee Gees. Like I can do whatever. Like if you do it the right way, people are gonna have fun with it. Mm-hmm. So it's like I like getting tested in that way.
Yeah, so that's cool. Like, I mean, it's like always a challenge for you to have an audience, and then you always have to constantly like feel the audience.
Yeah. And
like adjust your music to their taste.
Yeah, I'm a professional people reader. That's what I say. Like my job is 90% people reading, because I'm always trying to like. If there's someone not moving, like if there's like a crowd of people, if I'm DJing somewhere, I'm like the right side of the stage seems like they're not really having a good time, but the left side of the stage seems like they're really liking it. It's like, how can I like blend these worlds? So I'll just like, especially earlier in my sets, like since I normally DJ like the full night if I don't have an opener, that first hour is like me trying to like throw random records to see like what type of vibe people like. So I'll throw like artists to be like, okay, if like the crowd majority likes this artist, then they're gonna like what I play like later. That's like typically how I feel it out. But I'm always trying to like read the room and be like, okay, like what's this space gonna be? And that's why I always try to like weddings and things like that keep me on my toes, because it's like every wedding's different, every show is different. So it's like my job can never really get boring because it's like it's never really repetitive. So
yeah. I know you brought this up earlier because you said you get a lot of like satisfaction in the process up into the event.
Yep.
Like, is that what you enjoy the most, or is maybe an aspect of at the end of the night, like just how the feeling of that show went is enjoyable to you?
I think it's a combination of both. Like the prep is fun because it's like I get to be like in my apartment, like just zoned out on music, which is like I get to be like a nerd about it as far as like the beats per minute of a song and like the key of these two records. So they mesh together. That's where I can like do my nerdy stuff. But then performance is everything. It's like equivalent to like shooting hoops in the gym versus like playing in the basketball game. Like the prep is always going to be fun, but like if you can't perform, then it's like, what's the point? So it's a little bit of both. And like at the end of the night, I always like let out of like relief of like made it through another set, like did it. Mm-hmm. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. It's just in like the whole process of from preparation to like actually doing it.
Yeah. I mean, I think I had to fall in love with the prep more than the performance, because before I was getting like the actual shows, I had to love the prep. Like I had to just be ready at all times. So I was just like always practicing. And so it's like now when I get to the performance, I'm always like confident. Like nothing really like rattles me. And one of my like close friends like noticed that the other day. Like we were doing something like setting up like a TV or something, and we were like troubleshooting how to like get this to work, and she was like, you're always like just so chill in these moments. And I'm like, because I've had to troubleshoot so much like DJing, as far as like getting to venues and the speakers don't work, or like my mic cord doesn't work, or this person has the wrong cable, or whatever it may be. Like I've always had to like figure out stuff on the fly. So I'm always like have to keep a level head, because if I lose it, then it's like everybody's done, like, you know. So I'm always just like super level headed with that stuff. So I think falling in love with the prep made the performance easier in that. So I think, to answer your question, I think the prep is probably what I love the most, I guess.
Yeah, and even like the prep, like the practice, and even like the troubleshooting items you brought up, like those are always things that you have to do as like a business owner and doing something yourself.
Right.
Like you're constantly having to troubleshoot, like I need to make money here, I need to like get more gigs and stuff like that. It's always something that you have to be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Figuring out.
And that's like the cool thing, like betting on yourself 100%. Like that's what people don't realize, like the behind the scenes of like the errors. Like we all mess up. Like I've messed up plenty of times, but when I like think back to like my first early shows and stuff, I was like, this was terrible. Like I was like, this wasn't it. But going through those things is what makes you a better business owner. Like no matter what your business is, like you have to take those bumps on the head, so you're like, okay, I know not to do that again, or I know how to do it better, or I might not be the best at the business side, so I might need to have someone help me on that. Or just like getting influence from like other places, I think is like always what keeps you like generating success in whatever you're trying to do. So no, you're good.
Sweet. Have you ever, so you've been doing full-time DJing for a few years?
4 years.
4 years.
It's always hard because the pandemic year is like hard to count, like because that was like a tough year. But yeah, 4 years.
Okay.
I didn't do many shows the pandemic because you weren't allowed to be around people. So that was probably the most stressful time I've had during DJing. I haven't really talked about it too much like publicly, but I was like ready. Like I thought I was like done DJing like when pandemic happened, and like only being in small crowds and things like that. It was like very selfish of me at the time, because I was like, what am I gonna do? Like I was like always thinking about that, but I'm like, okay, like there's got to be a bigger purpose in this. Like how can I give back? And that's when I actually poured in even more to work with the Young Life high schoolers, because I'm like, high schoolers right now are like missing proms and all these things, and it's like when you're younger, those are the things that like that's all that matters. Like that's like all we cared about. That's how I was anyway. I was like, oh, school dances and who's going with who, and like that was like so like my head was too into that stuff. But my high schoolers, it's like they know nothing else. So once that stuff was happening and I saw it affecting them differently, and like how hard they were taking stuff, I was like, okay, like I have to like put my stuff aside and like realize like other people are going through real things, especially like losing family members, things like that, God forbid. But luckily I never had COVID or experienced anyone close to me getting really ill from it. But I know people who really were like friends of friends who were like really experiencing it. So I was like, okay, it made me humble myself as far as like, okay, like the shows or the income is like gonna come eventually, but how can you give back to people? And that's when I chose to work with like young life more, because I was like, the youth is what's gonna be the future, and they're like tainted by this more than ever because they've never had to be social distance like from people. And it made me realize, because we always thought like these new kids were like way more introverted, as far as like always growing up with like tablets and things like that, like they were the technology era, but even them, they were struggling with not having like human interaction. So it was like pretty interesting. But
yeah, it would have to been tough.
Yeah, no,
just when you're a kid.
Yeah, like that's when like not being able to hang out with your friends, like virtual learning. I'm like, I was bad at learning in class when I had someone help me, let alone learning virtually when I have an Xbox sitting right next to me. Like I couldn't imagine having to do that. Like that was just tough for me. So I was always like asking the kids questions, and I think that's what got me really close to a lot of the high schoolers, because they're like, oh, Blasé genuinely cares about like what's going on with me. He's not just like here. Because normally when I'm DJing like at the club, like we call it club on Mondays, when I'm DJing for the kids, I don't get to interact with them as much because I'm like playing the music while they're doing the games. So a lot of the times, like we kind of switched the layout and started hanging out with them a little bit more. I got to hang out with them a little bit more, and that's when they were like, oh, like he actually like hangs out with us. It's not just like a job. And I was like, oh no, like I come here to hang out with y'all. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But yeah, so the pandemic year did count in the 4 to like long answer for you.
Yeah.
But
Was that did that feel like your lowest point?
for sure. I think like it's career wise for sure. I think it was kind of crazy though, because the year before that I was like overworking myself. Like I was just like taking every show, like, well, not every show, but I was taking a lot of more shows than I should. I didn't have much of a personal life. I wasn't hanging out with any of my friends. Like I would text them, but I'd be like, can't hang out this weekend. Like I kind of like, it made me easier. Like, how do I word that? It made me like seclude myself even more, and I justified it by work. I was like, oh, I gotta work, or I gotta prepare for the show, or oh, I gotta do this. My set's gotta be better this week than it was last week. My friends were like, hey, like you gotta enjoy yourself. And I didn't take any vacations. I didn't do like anything. I would always be like, I might get booked for a show. I might, you know, I would always like say that, and I was like, I gotta live my life, because before I DJ'd, I like loved traveling. I loved doing all these things. But then that first year, it's like you don't have the income to travel. Then once you start making the money, you kind of get addicted to like the booking and things like that. So when the pandemic year kind of sat me on my ass, excuse my language, I was like, all right, well, like now it's my time to like learn what I like doing. So I got to travel a little bit more, do some more stuff like that, and get really close to like a lot of my friends. And it was good. It was good for me. So I
feel like it is tough, especially like if you're trying to carve your own path in something. Like I kind of did the same thing. Like when I dropped out of college.
Shout out to the dropouts,
like, man. Yeah. Like you're kind of on your own path in a way at that point.
Yeah.
And like I did also fall into maybe like a negative path of like, you know, I didn't maybe chat with family and hang out with them as much as reflecting now I would have wanted to. And like I didn't have as great a relationships then as I do now with family and friends. And there's also like an aspect to that where it's like, you know, you feel like you maybe do need to focus on your craft so that, you know, now you're able to have the time to put into like relationships and friends and family. So I don't know if you like look back and feel that same way, or like you wish it would have changed.
Yeah, like I was saying, like I think it needed to happen. Like now that I do, like that's where the confidence came from. I'm like, okay, the craft is good, but your mental has to be good to perform, like whatever you're doing, no matter what the career is. And I think a lot of people don't know, like especially like dropping out of school. Like I'm sure you beat yourself up about it, because it's like then it's like, okay, I have to prove to people like I'm dropping out, but it's something good's gonna come from this. Mm-hmm. So it's like I'm gonna take these sacrifices and take these bruises and this thing I'm doing to show people like, yeah, I dropped out, but like, you know, like there was a reason for it. So that's like was how I always justified like overworking myself. Even like working at Wells Fargo, I'd always like pick up extra shifts and do these things, but I'm like, I wasn't like happy. I was doing chasing these accolades in a different way, but I didn't even know I was doing it. So then when the pandemic year happened, I was like, I got depressed for a while, because I'm like, dang, like I put all this time into DJing, and like it could be done, or like all these like people, like I had a lot of different connections I was making. Like I was gonna DJ like the Big Ten tournament, potentially. I was talking to someone, a DJ in the Big Ten tournament, and the pandemic happened like literally the next month. And I was like what? Like this is supposed to be the thing. Like this would have launched my career, did all these things, and da-da-da-da. And I was just like beating myself up about it. And then I like sat down and I was like, I could have burnt out in 2020 just off of like, if I would have gotten all these shows and did all these things I wanted, just because I wasn't like mentally sane and like taking care of myself. Like I wasn't resting enough, because I'm up late nights and I would get up early and try to work out and do these things, and again, not hanging out with people, so I'm not getting like the satisfaction from like social interactions. I'm kind of treating everything transactional, which wasn't good. But yeah, so I think everything happens for a reason. Like I'm not saying the pandemic year happened for me at all, but I think I found benefit in having to stop working. Like I was like, now that I have to sit down, it's like now I have to look within to like fix what's going on. And then I was like, okay, now I'm ready. Now it's like I can handle this. I can turn down certain shows. I can feel confident in what's going on. And it's good finding balance. Like I'll take shows off sometimes. Like I'll go out of town and like book a DJ to take one of my residencies or do anything like that. And that it's like was hard for me to do at first. So I'm like, oh, like this one show missing, it could turn something out. So it's like now I just feel more at peace at it. I'm like, it'll work. It all works out. So
Nice. Kind of looking onto the horizon, is there any shows, they could be your own,
okay,
or they could be other shows that you are just amped for?
Amped for. Trying to think. I really wanted to go to the Her concert last night, but I didn't go to that. Shows that I'm really, really looking forward to. I don't think so. I mean, I'm always excited like my career growing, so like I don't really have like a certain thing, but shows that I'm really looking forward to. Man, I look forward to TV shows more than like shows, to be honest. Like I'm a big movie like TV buff.
Okay. You have any favorites right now?
Favorite shows right now. Moon Knight is really good. If you're in the Marvel universe, that's really, really good. What else have I been watching? Breaking Bad's like my favorite show of all time. If you've never seen it, really good show. It's on Netflix. Go watch it. I've watched it through like 3 times. But I watch a lot of movies. Like I'm like obsessed with movies. Like because again, introvert. Like my mom always used to take me to the movies like growing up. So it's like I'll go to the movie theater by myself sometimes. Like if I'm stressed, I was like, go to a movie. Like why not? Because when you're watching that storyline, it's like you kind of forget about your own stresses. So I'll go do that. And then, but as far as any big shows, I don't think I have any big shows coming up or like that I'm looking forward to. But if something comes up, let me know. If everyone feels confident about a show coming out, I'd love it.
Sick.
I feel like after the pandemic, shows have been a lot different. Like artists are kind of like waiting to tour now. So I feel like next year. Oh, actually, I lied. The Weeknd I want to go see. I don't think he's coming to Minneapolis. So I think he's only going to Chicago. The Weeknd show. I heard his last show at XL like 3 years ago now was really, really good. So I would want to see that.
Nice.
But yeah, I was saying like a lot of the big artists aren't really touring right now because the pandemic stopped them from dropping music. So because they couldn't tour. So now that they're like dropping music, I think next year there'll be like a lot of big tours. So hopefully there'll be some shows. I'll update you on that. There might be some shows I might be looking forward to. But
nice. When's your next event that you're gonna be at?
Movement culture event.
Okay.
You have to remind me of the date because
May 19th.
May 19th.
Yeah.
I'll be that for sure. That's the next big event. I'm at Basement Bar every Friday. What else do I have going on? That's it right now. And then in the summer, I leave for a month. So I work for Young Life in Michigan. So I DJ summer camp for a full month. So that's in the end of June to end of July. So I'm really excited about that.
So you do that for a full month?
Full month. Crazy.
Wow.
I did it for the first time last year. So it was like crazy because that's like what I was saying. Like with the pandemic, I was like, okay, like how can I like help these kids? So I really wanted their summer to be like the best summer ever. And it was like we were still dealing with COVID a little bit. And staff still had to wear masks, but I was like, these kids is like their first time like kind of getting unleashed back to the world. So Young Life, they do a summer camp every week, and I was like, I want to do it for the full month. So I stayed a full month. Well, it's like 23 days or something like that, but DJ like 5 times a day, which is pretty sick.
Every day?
Every day, yeah. Like 5 times a day. I walk so many steps. It's like crazy. But it's this beautiful camp. They have like lakes and all these crazy things they can do and ropes course and all these things. But I DJ like a beach party. Then I DJ in the cafeteria. I DJ all these crazy places. And the kids like, they love it, man. Like I was signing autographs last year. It was like it was nuts. I was like, I'm not even. They're like, Blasé, will you sign my shirt? I'm like, sure, like whatever. Like taking pictures. It was like super sick. So I want to do that. I want to try to do that every summer as long as I can because it was just like the fulfillment from that was crazy. But I think that's like the show I'm looking forward to the most. That'll be like crazy. I'm like prepped for that right now. But
dude,
cool.
I love you do those shows.
Oh
that's
man,
awesome.
It's like the dopest thing because I'm like when we were younger, man. Like I don't know about you, but the music was never really catered to us. Like the music wasn't like modern. Like it was like chicken dance and like cha-cha slides, like the one that people know, I guess. But it was like all very like corny, like old people trying to be young. So I was like, well, let's get someone in who like does this for a living, and then I can just like try to talk to the kids. And since I do it on Mondays already, when the summer comes, I'm like, I already know what you guys want to hear. It's a piece of cake. So it's like awesome because I'm like, it makes the kids like just feel like they have a purpose in what they're doing. Like I feel like if the camp isn't catered to the kids, and it's like, what are we doing it for, you know? And it just loosens the kids up. They get to bond with their leaders and meet new kids from different areas, connect on social media, do whatever they need to do. And it's like, I feel like I got to help like break that barrier for kids don't have to come in being guarded. Because I like most kids don't like going to camp. Like most kids like some kids want to go, but there's kids that are like, will this actually be a fun camp? So it's like when they come in and there's a DJ like playing their favorite records and they get to dance around and be in this nice summer day. It's like it's hard to lose when that's happening. So yeah.
Nice. I'm gonna wrap up the podcast. Final question.
Yep.
If you were to leave your last piece of advice right now to your younger self, what would that be?
Ooh. Last advice to my younger self. Have confidence. I think that's what it is. Like, keep believing in that confidence. As long as you have the confidence in yourself, it'll work. Just don't quit. I think if I would have gave up on confidence, I think there was times when I was younger that the confidence wasn't fully there. And if I would have poured into myself even more and had the confidence, who knows what I'd be right now. So I'd say just keep going.
Nice. I love it.
That's all I got.
Sweet, Blasé. It's been great chatting with you. Love everything you're doing in the community. It's been great having you at Movement Culture, just creating the vibe for the place.
Of course.
And just keep crushing.
Gotcha, man. It's going to keep getting bigger. Y'all better be at the next event.
Hey.
Better see you at the event.
Let's go. Thank you for tuning into the podcast with J Blasé. If you enjoyed it, please send us a DM on Instagram at BehindTheVisionPod or ever_north, or leave us a review, as we love to receive your feedback on the show. If you want to stay up to date on new podcasts and collection drops from Evernorth, check out evernorthco.com. Thanks again for listening, and hope you have an amazing day.